So here's one of the moments I was thinking of. You've been saying the story, telling the Magid, it's been going on, it can go on. I mean, it's the biggest part of the Seder. Someone turned to me at one point in the Seder and there's like, are we still at this part? Step 5? I'm like, yeah, that's where we're going to be parked at for a long time. The Magid section, and you're telling this story, maybe you're getting into a conversation, who knows what's happening, and you're telling and telling and telling. And finally, you're getting something to eat. And so you might not notice that at that moment of getting something to eat, there's actually a lot of interesting and symbolic action. And I think symbolic action is really, really powerful. And if we get into that, you can see what is our tradition trying to teach us. So there's 3 steps, right? Kadeh, Surchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, Magid. Step 5, tell the story. Right? Magid, Rachsa, Motzi, Matzah. Right? So there's kind of 2 steps that go hand in hand. The washing of the bread, washing before bread, whether it's challah, matzah, we always do washing. And then you go right into the bread here, which is matzah. And it has 2 words in the way that it comes down to us in Haggadah. And by the way, those 15 steps in the cute little song, much later in Jewish history. But it's motzi and matzah. It's not just hamotzi, like we might refer to it as who's going to do the motzi. But it is, right, the hamotzi blessing, plus a special blessing for eating matzah, only recited at the Seder, even though you may, in fact, eat matzah on other moments. I'm getting some ringing. Is anyone else ringing here? You are? Okay. How about now? Better. Okay. So how do we do it? Traditionally, you have a Seder plate. If you have one with 3 shells, that is the traditional Seder plate. Ideally, you have shmora matzah, guarded matzah. Ideally, it's handmade, and you have 3 round matzahs. Then you pull them out of the Seder plate. We have uncovered them earlier in the Seder, right at the beginning. Alach anya. This is the bread. This is the bread of affliction. Right, so we pointed out the matzahs. We've uncovered them. We've covered them. It's like shul. We're standing. We're sitting. We're standing. Sitting. I almost lose track of if the matzah is uncovered or covered. And we pull out all 3. Right? What's the deal with the middle matzah? If you were paying attention earlier in the Seder, we've split it in half, and half of it's been hidden for the afikomen, although, who knows, maybe you didn't play it. I just left mine right on the table, and no one even noticed. But it's 2.5 matzahs. Now, why do we need, well, let's do any holiday, Shabbat or any holiday. We're making hamotzi on any holiday. We're about to do it in a few minutes. You have to have 2 loaves. 2 loaves of bread, 2 whole challahs, 2 whole matzahs. It does kind of look shvach. I'm just going to say that. It does just, it's flat. All right, it's Pesah. 2 loaves. So we have the bottom matzah is whole, and we have the top matzah is whole, and then we have this broken matzah. And we take all 3 of them, and after washing, traditionally we don't speak. We go right into the blessing, which is hamotzi. But then there's another step. What happens right after that? No, I'm still in the matzah. You haven't even eaten it. But something else happens before the next blessing. I hear murmurings. It's like the Israelites in the wilderness. What are the murmurings? There's another blessing. But in between the motzi and the second blessing, there's an action which you might not have noticed. You might not even have done. You put the whole matzah, the bottom matzah, back away. And so you're left with 1 whole matzah and 1 broken matzah. And you say the second blessing, al achilat matzah, with 1 whole and 1 broken. Let's see this in the text. Instead of going back to the earliest layer, I'm going to go to the newest layer, between the 2 whole ones. And then, hold in your hand v'yavarech hamotzi. And you say hamotzi, ve'al achilat matzah, ve'achar kach yivatzah me'ashlema ha'elyona. Then you take from the upper whole one, and the broken one, both of them together, and dip them in salt. Okay, like we salt the challah, we salt the matzah. That's the Sephardic custom. The Ashkenazi custom is not to salt. But, we're very loose with our Sephardic customs in Ashkenazi. I just did the Sephardic Haftorah. It's all good. Okay? So this is where the Shulchan Aruch codifies it, and it's based on Maimonides. So we'll go back 500 more years, or about 400 years in time, to Maimonides, writing in Fostat in Old Cairo in the 12th century. V'lokeach shnei rikikim. You take 2 cakes, okay? At that time, not crunchy matzah, right? These are softer matzot, right? Not machine-made, a little bit softer than even our shmura matzah, right? V'cholek echad mehem. So in that time, it looks like yachatz was not a separate step, but this was the moment where you broke it. So interesting to see how the Haggadah keeps evolving, just like all of our traditions, and the Siddur keeps changing. Meniach parus letoch shalem, right? And you take the whole and recite Hamotzi lechem min aretz. But then, why do you not recite the blessing as on other festivals? And Rambam gives a reason, because this is lechem oni. Madar kosha oni beprusa, afkan beprusa. Just like a poor person is accustomed to eat a broken loaf, they cannot afford a whole loaf of bread, a whole matzah. So too, we must use a broken loaf for the motzi in terms of eating. Right? We are going to then eat, right? You are supposed to then take that whole matzah and the broken one, pass them to everyone in the Seder, and everyone eats from the whole and the broken together. So the question is, why? Let's take a look at the Gemara. The other side has the quote from Deuteronomy that says that matzah is lechem oni. It's not just a hurried up matzah, but it is the bread of distress, let's call it, bread of affliction. And now let's look at the Gemara, and then I want to hear what you think about this custom and how we might understand this Talmudic take and how we evolved into this actual custom, what it might mean. I'm going to read it in English, just in case you're wondering what's going on here with the bold, right? This is a Steinsaltz/Sefaria translation, where the bold is the actual words from the Aramaic, and the non-bolded words are the ones that fill in so that you can more easily understand the Talmud. Shmuel said that the phrase, the bread of affliction, lechem oni, means bread over which one answers, onim, matters, i.e. one recites the Haggadah over matzah. Right? This is a very cute little pun, not the actual etymology of the word, but having a little fun. Shmuel's like, like Zach likes to play with words, right? It is lechem she'onim alav. It is bread that's going to help you ask questions and then bring answers that you can talk about, right? As we keep uncovering it and talking about the matzah all night long. It's also taught in a Braita, in an earlier piece of rabbinic material from the years 0 to 200. Lechem oni is bread over which one answers many matters. Okay? It's a bread you want to talk about. Strange bread. Alternatively, in the verse, lechem oni is actually written without a vav, which means ani, a poor person. Just as the manner of a poor person to eat a piece of bread for a lack of a whole loaf. Flip over, now we're back to page 2. So too here, he should use a piece of matzah. And this is where we get that origin of the custom. In Masechet Pesachim, this is the tractate dealing with Pesach. Alternatively, just as the manner of a poor person is that he heats the oven and his wife bakes quickly, a little gender jobs here, stereotyping, before the small amount of wood that they have used up. They don't have enough wood to really heat up their oven. In that case, so too here when baking matzah, heat up the oven, his wife bakes quickly so the dough doesn't rise. That's why matzah is called the poor man's bread. So my question is, what is going on here? What is the Talmud trying to teach us? And what about this custom, which I think can be often overlooked? You're so hungry, you're like just picking up matzahs, let's go. I don't even know which one is at the bottom, the middle. What am I doing with it? So what is going on here? Why do we have this custom? Or if you want to jump into the Gemara, what do you see in the Talmud here? Yeah, Esther, start us off, please. Okay, so we have plenty, this whole loaf, to remind us what we have and that we're blessed to have it. And at the same time, we're going to remember lechem oni. And at the beginning of the Seder, when we sing halach ma'anya, right, we are inviting all those who need a place to eat to come in and make sure that they have a Seder. I know many people looking around the room invited other people who didn't have a Seder. A big, big, big mitzvah to try to do that. All right, other thoughts. David, please. Nice. So you're referring like the brokenness is the slavery and the wholeness is there, which could be another additional custom if you want to really build on that. When you get your 2 pieces of matzah tonight, eat first the broken one and then the piece of the whole one. Or if you're very talented, eat them both together. I don't know. I don't want anyone to choke. Terry. Because someone has put out fake afikomens to throw off. Yeah. So that obviously an interesting custom. A number of people mentioned that, and I have heard of that custom. Obviously, not exactly this teaching, but an interesting teaching of putting together the broken and then making it whole. Other thoughts as we go around? Richard, please. Nice. So Richard says, poor spiritually. Think about the second telling, right? We have 4 tellings of the story in the Haggadah. Each one has a question part, an answer part, and then a song of praise. And in the second telling of the story, right, it says mitchila, from way back when our ancestors were idol worshippers, and it is a spiritual, religious journey that we go on and believe in. And so maybe to see Pesach in that way of becoming more spiritually whole, the mystical tradition picks up on that a lot and sees chametz as this whole kind of puffing up of yourself and the need to kind of strip down to the core and look at matzah that way. Other thoughts as we go around and looking for another take on this. What do people think? Good custom? Bad custom? Try it tonight? Not so much enthusiasm, but that's okay. I know it's a late night. What? Good. People are in favor of it. So first, I want to just offer 2 quick teachings about this in strong favor of this custom. And I love customs that give you action to represent the values. Because values stick not when you just say, here's a value. Values stick when you make them into a song, when you act them, when you participate in them, when you eat them, is a good way to do it. Obviously, Catholicism went big on that. Okay, so this is to remind us of a couple of things that I think are important. Right? One is the notion of words. And I like Shmuel's playing with the words to think about words. Right? And when we're telling this story, and I talked about it last year, that second cup of wine, or grape juice, right, is a cup that you don't drink from until after this long period. I don't know how long it goes, but it could be half an hour, it could be an hour and a half. I like 2 hours. But however long that period is, you've poured in your words of Torah, your ideas, your thoughts, your perspectives into that cup, and you drink them. And so the idea now is that these words of Torah can be also put into the matzah itself, a bread in which we answer many words. And so at the Seder, we're saying that suffering isn't something that is just hidden, but we can actually talk about it out loud. The rabbis teach that, of course, in the Mishnah, right, that you begin with our low state, Machtchil b'gnai, Mesayim b'shevach. Right, we start in a low place of what the Jewish people experienced, and we end at a higher place. And of course, we are supposed to see ourselves in that. In every generation, you should also see yourself in that. your own suffering, your own tsuras, and our people's tsuras, the world's suffering, right? All of these layers are happening simultaneously. And so the suffering is not hidden, but it's named and shared, and I think it is then called into a sense of responsibility, right? This broken matzah representing poverty, right? A very concrete manifestation of the brokenness of the world as people suffer with food insecurity in our own country and obviously in hunger throughout the world, and at the same time affliction, a deeper level of hardship. The blessing over this al-chilat matzah, this second blessing, teaches us not only to remember the poor, but the Haggadah is now turning this bread into speech, into a kind of testimony, into a kind of invitation to talk about the world through that lens. A couple of other thoughts. Obviously, this pertains to our world today. But I think I like the idea that the broken piece is not hidden. At first, it's hidden because you have the two whole matzahs and then the broken ones in the middle. So you don't see it. Because often, suffering, personal or otherwise, is hidden. We don't always show that off. Right? We don't always tell the world, actually, I'm dealing with something. How are you? I'm fine. Right? But actually, when you get into it a little bit more, there's pretty much everyone has a level of tsuras and a brokenness that is there. And so on Pesach, we're not hiding it. We lift it up. We say the bracha for the matzah on that brokenness. And we then eat it. The broken matzah teaches us that to be worthy of this name, you need to make room for those whose lives are not whole. Lechem oni is not just the bread of affliction, it's the bread that then demands response. How are you going to respond to it? And so even though we rejoice in our redemption, we're called in that very moment. Right? This is like the apex of the Seder. You just said Bechol Dor Vador, which I think is the thesis statement of the entire Seder, and now you're ready to eat that first piece of matzah. Boom. Right there, the tradition says, wait a second, we're going to invite you into a deeper idea of widening a circle of dignity, of compassion, of liberation that goes beyond ourselves and into all other layers. So at the Seder tonight, I invite you not to hide that broken piece. Hold it in your hands. Bless it without that second whole loaf to emphasize something that is different from other holidays where we're going to use both loaves and then use those fully. But put that second loaf away, which will become the Hillel sandwich later on, and use it to teach us that matzah is lechem oni, affliction, the bread of the poor, the bread on which many words are spoken, as Shmuel says, and so suffering must be remembered, poverty must be seen, and the story must be told out loud. And I'll end with the final notion, which is that the tradition loves to do this. At moments of peak joy and redemption, we still have the brokenness, and it's always dancing between the two poles. It is always there. At a wedding, right? So much joy, broken glass, right? The rabbis say, Gilu b're'adah, right? Have that sense of rejoicing, but also trembling. We're always aware. And to be Jews is to live in that very difficult space, right? That we're aware of joy and suffering coming in all kinds of moments. And you feel it, and it's there. And that's a cultivation of a certain sympathy, and I think the Haggadah evolved beautifully to give that to us. Chag Sameach.